Welcome to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast, presented to you by Hetra University. If you've landed here, you're probably passionate about how horses help people. Whether you're an instructor, therapist, in the business, or have experienced equine-assisted services yourself, we're glad you're here. Join us as we talk about the benefits, the science, to-dos, how-tos, and all of the reasons why what we do is so much more than just a pony ride. And now, from the Hetra campus in Gretna, Nebraska, here's your host, occupational therapist Katie King.
Welcome back to part 2. If you're like, what? There's a part 1. Do yourself a favor, go back and listen to the part 1 with Kathy Alm, CEO from PATH International. Last week, she so generously shared her story with us about her journey to her position. And this week, for part 2, she's going to share some hot topics from PATH International, including some changes and new offerings that they have. I also found out some really interesting things that PATH International is currently lobbying for us as a profession. Some important laws around credentialing and that sort of thing. So you're going to want to stay tuned. Enjoy. So tell me a little bit about, you said that PATH has put together a little something that, kind of echoes that to grow and educate and get together. Tell me a little bit more about that.
It's called Innovation Circles, and we launched it in January of this year. Essentially, we're kind of piloting it to see, okay, does this structure work? I want to give a shout out to Casey Henry, who is currently one of our board members. She's also a consultant. She's started several therapeutic riding centers and used to be the executive director at Fieldstone Farm. And Casey and I had been sort of dancing around this concept of center sustainability and creating a program that was going to help that. And we kept, going back and forth on stuff. And one day she came to me and she said, you know what? The key to our leadership has been support systems, has been colleagues, right? And I said, yes, right. And she said, what about this? And she framed out this program, and the way it works is that we pick a topic, and the 3 topics eventually we would hit on is fundraising, business savvy, and board development. Okay, so we started with the topic fundraising, and we designed a self-assessment that people take to see which stage they're at in their career. Early stage, mid stage, later stage, because we wanted to put colleagues together that made sense. We want the early stage folks to be together and the information focused on early stage, mid stage, etc. And the structure is that they meet once a month for 6 months. That meeting is a 90-minute period of time. The first part, 30, 45 minutes, is education. So in this first pilot, Casey and Lynn Petter are presenting on fundraising for early stage executive directors or development people. Could be a board member. They present some education, and then the attendees go into breakouts, and they're assigned groups, and they will be in that same group every month for 6 months, with the idea that they will talk about whatever information they just learned, as well as start exchanging ideas, as well as, we hope, making a connection so that that group will continue on long after the 6 months is done.
Yeah, and it creates kind of that community, but you're also, to bounce ideas around, but you're also getting that education piece, from you guys to help fuel that fire, I guess, if you will.
Right, and providing the platform and the way for folks to meet up, to consistently meet up. And our idea, if this works, is that eventually we might have 2 or 3 of these innovation circles going at the same time, because we'd have one for each of the different levels and or for the different topics. So if it works, we figure that will really start to build a nice base for folks and center sustainability.
For any project that you do, I think at Hetra, we're constantly thinking about sustainability, and it's hard as a nonprofit when sometimes you're funded by grants or by things like that where, hey, let's start this program. We have this awesome funding for that. great, now this grant is over, this program is over, but don't stop there, keep going. And so the idea of sustainability is really important in our industry, especially. Where do you think that, as far as sustainability goes, do you see PATH in 10, 20 years?
I see PATH International in 20 years to be even more of what we are being and striving for right now. I would like to see PATH International accreditation and certifications to be recognized by the public as essential for when they're choosing where to go to receive services, that the public would understand a PATH International certified professional or a PATH International center has certain standards, safety, and they can expect those standards. They can expect that safety. I would like to see PATH International even more on the forefront of the industry, continuing with the various initiatives that I mentioned earlier to make sure that we are improving everything all the time. I know any members listening to me is like, Kathy, no, not more change. Could you just pause, please? And yes, everybody, I hear you, I promise. So I'm not talking big change. I'm just saying continually make sure that what we're doing with the credentialing or what we're doing with our training and education is of the highest quality and is ensuring that kind of that level of service for the public. So it's I would hope in 20 years that we have more of our credentials accredited by a third party, an outside third party, which just gives that next step of credibility to those credentials. And last, I guess, but certainly not least, I see PATH International continuing to take more and more a role in advocacy, in paying attention to what kind of legislation is out there, and if it's any that might have an impact on our credentialed professionals, making sure that we're helping either to help it pass or change the language so it doesn't, negatively impact them. That up on the Hill in DC, they continue to be really aware of this type of service and appropriate funding. Right now, it's focused on veterans receiving equine-assisted services, and that we are supporting research. I don't know that I see us funding research even 20 years from now, because there are other organizations out there doing that, but that we are doing everything we can. And I also would like to see us, and this is sooner than in the next 20 years, but figure out a way to collect data that, even though it's not research, it's not the research protocol, but collect data in a consistent way that centers can use to prove the impact these different kinds of services have on individual.
You are speaking my language. That's huge for me right now. I just think that everything we can do to measure, and it's so hard because what we do is really qualitative. Like, it's very much like, it just helps, or they just seem so much better or stronger, and those things are wonderful and we love that. But, how can we measure that? How can we prove, look at these numbers. This is amazing. Look at these benefits. And I think that just makes us, gives us even bigger platform to stand on, having those numbers. And I'm working with several students right now, occupational therapy students that come through our barn to help us kind of build that, because I think their young education, or their, being fresh out of school, they know a lot, sometimes more with that. So how do we cultivate numbers, I think, is really important. But I could stand on that box all day long. So.
I completely, that's been one of the things that I've talked about since I took this position, and it is, unfortunately, it is complex. There's a lot of different people that have tried a lot of different things, and the biggest challenge is execution. Most of our centers, most of our credentialed professionals, they're running hard and fast. So we need to make it easy to truly collect this data, or they're not going to do it because they're way too busy feeding the horses and teaching sessions or lessons or that sort of thing. So there are some data collections. I mean, bringing up Dana again, the Shea Center has been working with one in particular, along with Rock in Texas, and that is focused on OT, PT, and speech, I believe. The PDCAT is what it's called, and so that, one of my happy sunny dreams is that something that we could find a big grantor who would fund, because part of that is everybody needs a tablet. That's how they collect the data. Can we find a big funder to fund that and offer it to centers who are willing to do it? So those are all on the list of things we hope to get to.
If you could, speak to people, our listeners are, people in this industry. If you could speak to them and say, this is why you should be a member of PATH, or this is why you should, certify with us or be accredited through us, what would you say to them?
What I would say is, first and foremost, again, the standards. The standards are tried, true, and tested. And if you certify with us, if you accredit with us, it says that you are following those standards, and you can hold that up as a mark of credibility to the public, to funders, to stakeholders, to anybody that is looking at possibly coming to you for services. The other reason to certify with us is that the certification process is continually also tested. And in terms of the certified therapeutic riding instructor, the entry level certification for instructors, that we're going for third-party accreditation, which means an outside professional entity is going to say, yes, this tests what it's supposed to test. So if you pass it, you are supposed to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it says it's unbiased. And it says that it meets the standards, much like we ask our centers to meet certain standards to be accredited. It's the same process. So that process should, the pandemic kind of messed up with our timeline, but we should be able to kick off going for accreditation either by the end of this year or beginning of next year. So that's something.
I'm going through the instructorship process right now, so that's been really fun, and it's very thorough. This episode is sponsored by Equiforce. Equiforce is a database that allows you to track every facet of your organization, from horse, donor, and volunteer management to scheduling, grant tracking, incident reports, and tracking participant progress too. This is not a one-size-fits-all setup. Instead, Equiforce personally works with you to learn how your facility functions and takes note of your specific terminology so that they can create a unique system to match the needs of your organization. And of course, Equiforce provides an ongoing training and support so that your database can grow with you. Visit them at www.equiforce.com. That's EQUI-FORCE.com. I am curious. So when you go to have that third party do accreditation, is that what you call it? That third party is really just someone who tests, the quality of your exam, right? It's not like a third party horsemanship or something like that, right?
It's not third party horsemanship, but the third party tests the whole process. So it's not just the last online test. They are accrediting that our process, that we've gone through the job task analysis, that we have built our testing to what the job task analysis has told us an entry-level therapeutic riding instructor needs to be able to do. And there's two other reasons that that people should be members of PATH International. One is the free and discounted education. For credentialed professionals, they're looking for CEUs. For other folks in the industry, they're just looking for education. They're just looking for a way to connect. So education includes our conferences, whether they're virtual or in person, because people in our industry hunger to connect with each other. And so being a member of PATH International provides you the opportunity to do all of that at a discounted rate and sometimes for free. A member benefit, for example, is we just launched Member Connections, which is an online platform with different communities that you can join the administrators community, or you can join, there's one about terminology right now because that's a big hot topic, where it's a good private place that you can have discussions and ask a lot of questions. Other, center member benefits that I'm going to put a plug in because I've learned that a lot of centers don't even know they exist, is access to GrantStation, for example, which is a searchable database for grants. That's a member benefit. You have free access to it. It would cost hundreds of dollars if you purchased it on your own. And centers have access to some of the member connection channels without having, so the ED has access without having to be an individual member. So that's another member benefit. So just want to make sure that folks know there are tangible benefits to being members. And the last piece, which I understand may more speak to different people at different places in their life, but that is by being a member of PATH International, you're helping to you have a voice in standards. You're helping to set those standards, and you are helping to make sure that the industry as a whole is moving forward. You helped make sure that optimal terminology was developed. You're helping to make sure that we have a voice, so there's funding for veterans from the VA. You're helping to make sure that we have a voice. So there's a lot of states looking at passing legislation that would have a negative impact on certification. It's the behind the scenes work that y'all don't need to necessarily know. But there are states that have been potentially going to pass legislation that says you can't, nobody can say that they're certified because they want to open access to whatever job. Well, that's not good. That's not good for safety's sake. Yeah, well, don't worry. We're on it. We're part of the coalition that is monitoring that and working with the various state legislators to make sure that that doesn't get passed that way, that it doesn't harm us. As a member, it means that you would help fund. Here's another big issue that someday I would like to try to attack, which is L&I costs for centers. It's not an easy thing to address because it's by state. It's not like we can just go to a national group and say, hey, but most centers are categorized as high risk because it's horseback. They have horses involved. And so, it's horrifically expensive. But there is a way to go state by state and work with the state to say, hey, look at the safety record. This really shouldn't be categorized so high. It just takes a lot of time and effort because it's state by state. But those are the kinds of things that membership also helps support and ultimately benefits you, but it's harder to see.
Right. And I think it's important to stay educated in the field that you're in, because you don't know unless you know, right? You can only do the best with what you know. And being plugged into something like PATH helps you stay in that know so that you aren't negatively impacted by something you weren't otherwise educated about.
And that way you're not alone. That's a huge thing. Over half our centers have budgets of $140,000 or less. That means there's one, maybe two people doing it all. and by being a PATH International member, we connect you so that you're not alone.
When you were first coming up, into PATH and making that big transition in your life, you talked so much about how other people helped you stay sane and, move through that. And that's just so important, is just staying connected with people that you can trust, that you can communicate with and bounce ideas around with, and support, truly. I mean, being a big support system is huge. So
It is.
Well, I sure know that HETRA enjoys being a member of PATH, being accredited, and having all of our instructors go through that process. We feel like we've never been a more safe institution to come to receive lessons, and we proudly display that as much as we can. So we appreciate PATH for doing all that footwork for us.
Well, and I appreciate you, the testimonial, because I think it's great for people to hear that.
I told you, every time we end a podcast, I always end with a good fun question for us. So if you could tell us about either your heart horse or your heart animal, if you've had one.
I have absolutely had a heart animal, not a heart horse. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to grow up with horses, and
drawings of them, though, it sounds like.
I know. I should have named them, and then I'd have a heart horse. But definitely a heart animal, and I may get a little bit emotional because I had to say goodbye to her just last July. But she was 18 and a half years old. She was my faithful companion for 16 years. She went everywhere with me. Yeah, when I was a little bit, she could come to work with me. So we were together pretty close to 24/7. And she was just the smartest, most loving. I always said to her, you're my heart and soul. I talk to her all the time. I still talk to her, to be perfectly honest. Hope nobody thinks I'm completely crazy. But when Bill's off working in Seattle, and I'm home alone, I still talk to her sometimes because she was just. I sometimes joke that she's the longest primary relationship I've ever had. And Bill and I are getting close, but we're not there yet. But yeah, for her energy. I mean, I guess that's why she's a heart animal. It's just who she is. It's just her energy, and yeah.
I'm in the same boat as you. I've had my dog Benelli and we've been through it all, thick and thin, and I don't have kids yet, so I truly feel like it's like my soul outside of my body. Like, it's just, he looks at me and I'm like, I don't even know, you can't even talk, but yes, and he just gets me.
Right. That is absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, Morgan came to me right as I was going through finishing a divorce, and I can picture her now in the car with me. She just wanted to be with me. She didn't care what we were doing, where we were going. She just wanted to be with me, and I just wanted to have her there. There's something about that energy, and I could still remember her curling up. I'd be on my side and she'd curl up against my stomach to sleep, and it just wonderful to have that kind of to be lucky enough to have that kind of energy in my life.
Just something that's given by somebody to that creature. And I think all of us in this profession believe that too, in that energy, and the animals and people and all of that is just, it's so good for the soul. So
well, and and we'll do anything for them. I mean, as evidence that the Morgan got she started having pretty serious problems she could still get around. In fact, she'd still like to run, even though we'd try to stop her. But she couldn't do stairs so well. She was losing her hearing, she was losing her sight, and she couldn't navigate the doggy door, which meant she couldn't take herself out in the middle of the night. All of that meant that Bill and I found ourselves sleeping on a blow-up bed in the living room from November to July. I'd slept in the same room with her for 15 years. I wasn't about to stop now. Somebody needed to be around to let her out in the middle of the night if she woke up. And the blow-up bed wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. But that's when I knew this really was my heart dog.
I'm there with you too. I'd sleep outside if it meant that it would make Benelli comfortable. So I think all of us, especially right now in the cold, we're all out there breaking ice and putting blankets on and turning horses in and out or whatever we're doing. I think everybody can relate to that. So
I just had to share that story because it still cracks me up to think about that blow-up bed in the middle of the living room.
I love that. Well, thank you for spending so much time with me this morning, Kathy. I know you're very busy, and it was another hour you had to spend on Zoom, but I really, really appreciate you, and our listeners sure will too. So,
well, you're very welcome, Katie. I love spending the time with you and enjoyed our conversation very much.
This podcast is presented by Hetra University, an educational arm of the Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to our participants and the Equine-assisted Services community. Craving more content like this? We invite you to check out our series of webinars and much, much more over at hetrauniversity.org. If you'd like to help us work toward our mission, you can make a donation by clicking on the link in the show notes below or visit us at hetra.org. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Again, my biggest thanks to you all for helping Hetra change lives one stride at a time.